Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A that you can't find anywhere else. It is April 10th, 2024. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be your host. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator who helps funded startups and enterprises that are overwhelmed with AWS. And we do this by using our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 100 million times. So no matter where you find yourself on this journey, we are here to help your startup or enterprise launch better products faster and free up your bandwidth for innovation so you can nail this delivery every time. If you or your team has been banging your head against the wall, just head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. cloudposse.com/quiz, answer a few quick questions, and you'll get to book a meeting with me directly, and we'll discuss your situation to see if we can help you out. So today's format is informal. Engage as much as you'd like, ask questions. If you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, you can ask here. For those on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Join us by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. All right, let's get into some announcements. First one that I found was how Google goes about thwarting cache poisoning attacks. And it's a clever little way exploiting how modern DNS resolvers should work. So cache poisoning is based on how DNS works on the UDP protocol. So in the UDP protocol, it's connectionless. So any service can respond with a UDP packet, and you have to somehow verify that that response came from where it should. Well, DNS is plain text over the wire generally. There are ways to do encryption on DNS, but that isn't the default with it over port 53 on UDP. So to make it very difficult or improbable that the cache can get poisoned by forged UDP packets, what Google does is for every request that it sends out, it randomizes the case on the resource record, on the host names, and it keeps track of that. And modern DNS servers should respond with exactly the same case that the query was made with. So that way they're able to judge if a packet coming back for the DNS request was spoofed. Goes over, into, ideally DNS over TLS, which mitigates a lot of this, but it's a smaller percentage of the traffic that can take advantage of it. And here you can see an example of what we mean by randomizing the case of the query so you can validate the response. So it goes without saying that if you're spoofing DNS, you don't have visibility into the outgoing request. You can only, spoof the incoming request. All right. Anything to add to this? All right. I thought this was interesting. I don't know if we've announced it before. I just didn't remember it. It's an open source project, I believe, and it makes it very easy to have kind of these ephemeral SSH sessions on a Kubernetes cluster, where each session is an ephemeral container running on the Kubernetes cluster. And when that user logs out, I didn't mean those hearts. When that user logs out, then that container is disposed of. So anything left inside of that is just, gone. Has anyone used ContainerSSH? I'm curious. All right. Next announcement. This one took me a little while to parse. It wasn't quite what I thought it was to begin with. So Gravitational, the makers behind a popular remote access system called Teleport, have recently changed their license, but not quite the same as, say, other projects like Redis, Mongo, Elasticsearch, HashiCorp, etc. What they have done here is they've changed the license of the binaries distributed as part of what they call the community edition. So Teleport itself is already using a pretty aggressive license, AGPL, which is not very popular in enterprise settings because of its ramifications. Anything built linking to AGPL code needs to be itself AGPL, and that viral nature of the license, it contaminates other projects potentially. So what they are starting to do now is the teleport code base remains AGPL. They're going to stop publishing the binaries as they have been. I believe the binaries were technically under Apache 2. And you are now up, it's up to you, the end user or the company, to build those packages. And those you can still continue to use any way you want. But if you use the packages that they distribute under the Community Edition, it triggers this Community Edition license agreement implicitly here, that if you have under, it's similar to Docker, if you have under 100 employees or under 10 million in revenue, you continue to use the product as you wish. And if you're above that, to continue using the distributed binaries, you have to fork over, which obviously makes total sense to me. That is my interpretation. I am not a lawyer. Matt was probably going to chime in and say that in a second, of this very awkward licensing change.
I was actually going to also say that my interpretation was slightly different.
Okay.
I don't actually see anything that says you can build your own binaries and use it.
No, it is down here.
Right. But isn't that saying that the license or open source? Okay.
There was somewhere where they say building. No, build.
Because if you read the paragraph that you just had right there, starting with the June release, like if you read the header, starting with the June release of 16, we're switching Teleport Community Edition to a commercial license with new restrictions. And it says individuals can use it, but companies with more than blah, blah, need to contact sales to continue to evaluate and use Teleport.
Yeah, it's really confusing to me because they also say the open. So I think the confusion for me is, what is Community Edition? Is Community Edition to be conflated with the open source distribution? And the open source distribution remains AGPL v3. So it's confusing.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I guess, yeah, I'm not sure then exactly this. Like the way I read it when I first read it was basically you can't use it anymore. But I see how what you're saying makes sense. But then, like, I see that more as people who are going to embed the product, like in their product. Like if you build something with Teleport on top of, like, or you embed Teleport in your product or something, the AGPL license is what kind of runs on that. But then I don't know. Now I'm confused.
So my interpretation at first was kind of yours, but then I confess, I used ChatGPT to try and understand this announcement, and I shouldn't need to do that, but I did, and that was the answer ChatGPT gave me. Okay, there you have it.
So why? But then, like, why are they telling you individuals are free to use Teleport Community Edition for personal and hobby with no restrictions? Like, if you could just build it and run it yourself, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sure, it is. And a company with more than 100 employees and more than 10 million in revenue can probably build that binary themselves and run it that way if they needed to. So I have to imagine the spirit of it is probably akin to what Docker did, where you're free to use Docker if you're a smaller company, under 100 employees, and yada yada yada. I'm guessing that's what they're trying to do here, but it's confusing by this last statement here that everything continues to be AGPL. I don't think, like, if you dual license something, it's not the intersection of dual licenses, right? Is one or the other, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think what they're saying was like the source code is under AGPL, but before the binaries used to be under Apache 2. And now they're not going to release Apache 2, so that means everything goes back to AGPL, right? I don't know. I don't know how to interpret this
yeah,
whole thing.
I've
We
never,
need we
I've
need an
never
IP lawyer.
considered, yeah, I've never considered binaries being licensed different from the source code itself. I've always, you know, you find a project, the project is, you know, Apache 2. I would never think that the binaries are MIT or AGPL or something else. I've never seen that mode of distribution, but now I'm aware of it. Michael, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the that bullet at the top of the screen. It's a money grab in that sense. The way that I read it, it's still pretty much free. It is kind of confusing with the binary and the code part of it. But I think what they're doing is limiting the use of larger companies, basically, so that if you are a larger company and you do use the code as it is distributed, which I think is kind of funky because they do say you can compile it yourself, maybe even make your own AMI, but that gives them some grounds to stand on to say like, hey, if you are a larger company and you're using our product in a way that's not, I guess, in line with this confusing description of the license, then they have some grounds to stand on to come at you for maybe a little bit more.
We're also keeping Apache for open source documentation and cloud. Okay, library. Okay, never mind. Yeah, I'll reach out to them. We've worked with them for a long time and get some clarification on it. Maybe chime in next week. Thanks for that, adding that context. I think that is the spirit of what they want to achieve. Just curious how they're doing it. Saw this little interesting hack here. Where was it? If you're gung-ho, diehard, Open Tofu, open source, you know, module maintainer, perhaps, and you want to prevent your code, or you want to detect if code is running in one context or the other, what, like if you're running in the context of Open Tofu, or if you're running in the context of HashiCorp Terraform, then here is a clever little hack. I mean, hopefully there's a better way to do this later, like an environment variable or something. But right now, this is one way to do it. If any module is pulled from registry or if any provider is pulled from the registry opentofu.org, which is pretty much any provider by default if you're using OpenTofu, because you're not allowed to use the HashiCorp registry if you're using OpenTofu. Therefore, this is a way to detect if you're running inside of OpenTofu.
Yeah,
kind of a little bit of introspection there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right, next next one. I thought this was interesting. I don't know. Don't want to read into it. Is it an olive branch? I don't know. Not based on what we're going to talk about in a minute, but Apparentlymart, one of the core contributors, very vocal, very supportive, very helpful in the Terraform community, super active in one of the Slack communities. What is it? HangOps. Yeah, HangOps. Apparentlymart did contribute his key to, or a provider and his key to the OpenTofu registry. Apparently it's not actually working the code, but it's an interesting observation. All right, so this was the meat of what we wanted to get to today. HashiCorp put OpenTofu on notice. That notice has not been made publicly available to the best of my understanding. My guess is that notice was probably sent to the Linux Foundation, since the OpenTofu project is underneath that umbrella. But basically, the OpenTofu project was recently made aware of a letter by HashiCorp lawyers alleging that OpenTofu was not respecting the terms of its BSL license, aka BUSL, governing its Terraform codebase. OpenTofu vehemently disagrees with any suggestion that it misappropriated, missourced, or otherwise misused HashiCorp's BSL code. Indeed, it seems that HashiCorp may be conflating code that it had previously been open sourced under the MPL license and more recently developed code it published under the BSL license. OpenTofu's maintainers have investigated the matter and tends to issue a written response providing more detailed explanation of this position in the coming days. So that that subsequent announcement hasn't yet been made available. I'm sure it's going through rounds of lawyers and making sure it's bulletproof, but I have no inside knowledge. That would just be my guess. Now, it is interesting to see the circulation this has received and the likes that it has, and interesting comments down below. Looks like Pepe, your comment is on top for me as most relevant.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, well, I was actually expecting it to actually be sooner. So I was like, oh, okay, it came. Okay, awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised at all.
Yeah, you know, it's really not surprising. This is part of the playbook. I would expect, if two people get divorced, they aren't necessarily saying good things about each other all the time. And this is a divorce, if you will, the fork. So it is to be expected and to be taken with a grain of salt. I posted my thoughts on this as well in a response. Let's see if it comes up quickly here. It does not, too many reshares, but my position on it is this is predictable. This is what HashiCorp is doing because, as they say in marketing, no press is bad press. They stand to win either way, even if the accusations are false, which I presume they are. So the reason why it benefits them is it sows doubt in the minds of new people to Terraform, enterprises especially. And if you are a corporation, you want to steer clear of projects that have that kind of turmoil or liability that if you start using this, you are now breaking some license. I think this is going to get sorted out pretty quickly. I think what this is in the end going to do is polarize the community even more. People who are already gung-ho for Open Tofu are going to be solidified in that belief. Gung-ho HashiCorp customers and so forth probably don't care and aren't necessarily paying attention to it and are using it. And in the end, I think it just puts a bad taste in open source maintainers, communities, mouth looking at these things. What's nice to see is there's been a lot of positive support of this, but there's also been a negative PR campaign that came out at the same time. I think it's just kind of suspect, but I don't have a timeline of events. I'll be honest, I saw the InfoWorld post way before I saw any mention by Open Tofu about this happening. And I think the timeline of events that they want us to believe is this InfoWorld article comes out, and then HashiCorp lawyers send a letter to Linux Foundation, and Linux Foundation lets Open Tofu know, and Open Tofu gives this announcement. But I don't know that that's the actual timeline of events. It just seems suspect that these things come out around the same time. So here was that other article. You might have seen it floating around your social media. It was titled, Open Tofu may be showing us the wrong way to fork. Agree or disagree. And I think this is the popular counter argument that you will read on this without taking sides is in a mature code base. Well, okay, let me start with the claim or the assertion. If you look at the code as he brings up here, you'll see that code is relicensed under MPL. If you look at the actual implementations between Terraform's implementation of remove.go versus Open Tofu's implementation of remove.go, this is not the best viewing mode, but they have kind of at a 10,000-foot view a similar shape to how they work, the similar structure. But this is very quickly and easily explained away by counterarguments that in a mature code base, there are only so many ways to do something. And if you look at the actual business logic for how it does it, it's different. So another example Matt Calhoun was sharing with me is like, if you look at a code base that's using SQL statements, and it's like select star from foo, and then you see somewhere else, and that was licensed, say, AGPL, and then in the fork from, well, no, that's a bad example. That was licensed in the Buso license as BSL, and it's select star from foo, and then some other code has select star from bar. It's like saying we are infringing on the copyright of the first one because select star is in both places. But the actual business logic that we're selecting from, the foo and the bar, are different. So again, as he says, I am not, law is complicated. I'm not a lawyer. But actually, if anything, I think that this might show exactly how you do a fork in a complicated code base in a transparent and open manner. So what it appears that OpenTofu has done, and let me see here if I can find a quick example here. So that's the Terraform version. Here's the OpenTofu version. So what they basically did at OpenTofu was they copied code from the previously licensed MPL, Mozilla Public License code base.
Yeah. 3 and 4, lines 3 and 4 are the ones that you want.
Yeah, exactly. They copied code from the original MPL licensed code base. They are now creating new code, extending that license, but now they are the copyright holders because it's original code. They are using the Go, the structure of the Go code as this project has been implemented. And then they're doing their implementation below. So there will be overlap because they're inside of a framework in Go that they've developed around this project. So there will be a lot of similarity, but a lot of that similarity already pre-existed. And then the actual business logic for how it does it is different between the two. Different enough that, just trying to do a quick spot check, I can't see it. So, and Matt, anything you'd like to add to
that? The only other interesting tidbit in this whole thing to me is if you look at the contributor who brought this up and wrote the article for InfoWorld.
Yeah.
He happens to be the head of MongoDB DevRel right now, and was also previously at Amazon when Amazon had some had some challenges in their open source. He was the head of open source when Amazon had some disputes with a couple of other companies. And then prior to that, he was also at MongoDB before that. So I don't exactly quite understand the entire relationship here, but it also might seem like proving a point given Mongo went through the same thing, and Mongo is kind of seen as now the HashiCorp side of it, where they're trying to chase down people who are infringing upon code of a license that they changed. So I don't know if that's coincidental or not, but I found it interesting that given who he was, and that is not listed there in the in his byline or anything. It becomes when you dig into who he is, it's well, that makes a little bit more sense.
So if I can summarize that, the implication is that he is or has worked at MongoDB, which is a company in a similar position to HashiCorp. So it would be more apt to be sympathetic towards this kind of thing happening.
Yeah, and for 2 years, he was also the head of developer marketing and open source strategy at AWS, which is interesting too. So, but it was like MongoDB, AWS, back to MongoDB. So I don't know.
Yeah. So here was another post on Twitter, kind of from James Humphreys, one of the core maintainers or core people helping out in the Open Tofu project. James is with Spacelift. But he shows how, he explains a little bit why there's similarity and why the copyright headers were changed in this operation. Mark Atwood, he is a principal engineer at AWS in open source. So it was interesting to see his support of OpenTofu and, saying that this is, by the book, an implementation. Adam Jacob, CEO and co-founder of System Initiative, I think of Chef fame, also came out in support of OpenTofu and doesn't see a problem with this implementation. There was a issue opened shortly after that InfoWorld article came out that came out guns blazing, and was quickly convinced that this wasn't the case, and apologized and closed the issue. I think this is looking pretty good, at least in the court of public opinion that I see. This is looking pretty good for OpenTofu. Michael, I see you have your hands up.
Yeah, the one comment that I was thinking about, if you go, I mean, I know, like, if you compare the files, those lines 3 and 4, or 4 and 5, whichever ones they were, that show the copyright notice change between the two. But what I was looking at is the history of the file. And I think it made a point in the article as well that the HashiCorp file was contributed, so this is the OpenTofu file. 2 months ago, this change was made. The HashiCorp file, the change was made 5 months ago, and I don't think there's been any edits since then. And I'm drawing a blank on the timeline now because it seems like this has been going on forever. But I think the caveat is Hashi made their changes after the code was moved to the new license. And then this change was made very similarly to their code, if not lifted from their code 2 months ago. Yeah. And the license was changed. Those lines 3 and 4 were changed to the new license, or to the acceptable license. So I think, is that the caveat? Like, this code was, quote unquote,
it's slightly different. What they did is they copied the implementation of a similar operation of moved blocks, I believe. And moved blocks have been in the MPL version for a long time. So they took the moved block implementation and changed it to support the removed block implementation. Matt, you were going to say something? I cut you off.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So what I wanted to make clear, at least from what I can see, they did not take the HashiCorp implementation of the new feature that they did 5 months ago, like you said. What they did was they copied code that does something similar from another part of Terraform that existed before the fork was created, before the license was changed and the fork was created. When they did that and they copied it into this file never used to contain anything except for the licensed or the old licensed code. So they needed to add like a new header to it to indicate that this now contains both OpenTofu licensed code and old HashiCorp licensed code. So they added the header to say that there's multiple licenses that govern the file now. And that's basically what they were doing. They were saying some of this code came from HashiCorp, meaning like previous to the license change, and some of it came from us because we just wrote new code in here. And it looks very similar because they copied it from another part of Terraform, which I'm guessing is also how Terraform, like HashiCorp, actually implemented it. They found we're already doing something very similar. Let's copy that function here and then do it. And if you look at the history of that file, like you said, you can actually see multiple iterations of it over time. It isn't like they just copied and pasted it in one fell swoop and went with it,
Yeah. The original implementation dates back to, June of 21.
Yeah.
So what they did at OpenTofu, they copied this moved block, they transferred it over, they transferred over the moved block, kept the MPL license, then they changed the copyright to their own because now they are going to change that. and then they re-implemented exactly as Matt said. And
so
that's
it's
how you
copy
do it.
pasta. The original file, which was properly licensed and attributed, used, updated to implement this new feature. So just say like search and replace moved with removed, just for sake of discussion. I know it's deeper implementation than that.
Yeah.
And then update that file with a license that says, oh, by the way, this is the license for the file where this code actually came from, not the file that you think it is under the new license.
Exactly. It was derived from a different implementation in the MPL license code base that was close enough. And look, I mean, every self-respecting developer, how many times haven't we done something similar? You start a new project,
easy.
What's the closest thing? Okay, I'm going to copy that thing over here, done. Now change it and make it to my implementation. You just got to make sure you're copying from the right license. And that they did. So within OpenTofu, I mean, these are veteran open source developers with a lot of guidance from the Linux Foundation. There might be one or two more junior people on the team, but by and large, they are senior people. They know what they're doing. They're good open source citizens. I think that they have too much writing on this to make such an amateur mistake. And that's why this is the most plausible, likely, reasonable explanation based on how developers work, based on what they were trying to do, and based on how any rational open source developer would have tried to implement the same thing.
Yeah, and I think if you look in Terraform, like not Terraform, but like in HashiCorp, like Terraform in that repo, and you go there and just search, it's decode moved block. If you just put it in the search up above, like the decode moved block instead of removed block, and you'll actually see like the original.
Oh
yeah. You'll actually see the original implementation, and if you look at the history of those things, it goes back to, like Eric said, back in like before the license change happened. So they have a function that's like decoding the moved block. So now they basically just copied this and created a new function that decodes the removed block, and does something like similar to this whole thing. So it's basically like, because one argument I saw was like, well, they named all the functions exactly the same and they did this. And it's like, yes, because this pattern already existed in the code that was open source. So they just copied the exact pattern over for removed blocks, and changed moved to removed because that was what the new feature is. So if they come up with a new feature, foobar, and foobar doesn't exist in the old version prior to the license change, and then the implementations look almost identical, then you probably have a case. But in this case, I don't think there's any arguing that this is how it happened.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions about this? Wait, let me see what's in the Zoom chat here. Yeah, Alex says, previously I merely disliked Hashi for blocking PRs and feature requests for basic functionality, but now I'm heavily invested in opponent to them. I think that's what this is going to have the effect for some developers. Mark says, OpenTofu appears to have copied public available code boilerplate scaffold basing that helps them implement the new function. Yeah, I mean, copied publicly available code. MPL license code is the operative word here. MPL license code before the change, that was boilerplate. Exactly. Boilerplate code for how this stuff would work, and implemented the new function using boilerplate. It's like a template engine almost.
Yeah. I think just in summary, I'll say this really shows, in my opinion, the desperation of HashiCorp at this point. It's they're flailing and don't know what to do, but they're trying to do whatever they can to eliminate competition instead of just be better than them.
Exactly. Yeah. it's like it's like a net new, it feels like, I don't know what it is like, but it feels like a net new team in charge of, promoting this product and what it is, without an understanding of their roots or where they came from or how this stuff works in real life and open source. They're playing by like maybe some enterprise law playbook or something that doesn't work with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and finally, I'll say I'm very interested to see whether or not InfoWorld publishes like a retraction or a clarification or something. Given it seems like shoddy journalism to me to publish that and not actually do the background checking.
Yeah,
that's what upset me about this, is that this just feels like poor journalism. And regardless if it was like a hit piece or not, like that's just kind of sad, because they've obviously thrown a bunch of like FUD, fear and uncertainty into muddy the waters, and that just sucks. I did see, if you go to that the issue in Open Tofu, I was going to share that on LinkedIn, because at the end somebody says, hey, and it just happened, I believe, earlier today. Somebody says, hey, I wrote this email to the writer, and it sounds like they're working it out. And there's going to be an update. He says the whole situation is going to be resolved soon. And it's like, so that makes it sound like somebody like InfoWorld will probably pull back this announcement, will probably say something to the effect of like, oh, we made a mistake. That still sucks. There's still like, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people that have probably read the headline and are not having this discussion. And, in the court of public opinion, HashiCorp might have actually made a good call, because there's a lot of people that don't really care or don't go into the weeds on Tofu and Terraform. And they see this as, they don't see it like we do, like people who would join this call. So it's a shame. It's a real shame that they created such a divisive moment. I was like really sad to see it last week, and now it just feels like it's worse. It didn't have to
be true. Yeah. I'm sorry, I cut you off at the wrong time. Yeah.
No, but what you said is correct, and I think that's what's sad.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt made the same point internally before this. Like, people are just going to remember the headlines. So this did a good job of getting it out there. Fact or fiction.
Yeah, and you pick a publication like InfoWorld, regardless of that. Again, regardless if it was deliberate or not, and it's like people respect InfoWorld. I did. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. It's in the gray area. I do certainly share a bunch of articles that I find on InfoWorld, and take some with a grain of salt. But here's an example where they definitely. I'm going to have to double check sources before. Just promoting content on InfoWorld, if this is the kind of thing that they let show up. So
for sure, yeah, that's my opinion now, but it wasn't my opinion before.
No, yeah. It can be monotonous just to find things on why Hacker News. So I look elsewhere.
Yeah. I was going to say, unfortunately, I think this is commentary on the state of at least American journalism in general right now across the board. I think I would say that of many mainstream and technical publications that I used to respect for that what they were writing was fact-based and well-checked and all of that. And it's become much more, how quickly can we get the story out there and the headline out there? And if it's factually incorrect or only partially incorrect, well, don't worry, we'll figure that out later. And it's a sad state of journalism in general, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Everything as if it's clickbait.
Yeah. Clickbait rules the day. All right. Moving on. That was a good conversation. Thanks, everyone. This was shared with me. Feels like it's been around for a while. I'd never seen it. I thought it was, I mean, in some ways kind of cheesy, but in some way it's also really kind of cool. What Gorse does is it shows you the timeline in an animated fashion of commits towards a code base. And I'll just play like 5 seconds here so you get the gist of it. And you can customize this graph to actually add metadata here. This is anonymized, or this is like plain without it, but you can actually, it can be annotated with kind of like the files or the people making the changes. And you can run this against your private code base and kind of see how it's evolved and who's working everywhere. I don't know how actually useful it is, but it is interesting to see maybe the health of a repository based on the commits and how many people are using it. Anyone have more insight on this project than I do? All right. Another cool utility, Charmbracelet is a really awesome organization pumping out Go-based libraries or modules that you can use in your open source CLIs or GitHub Actions and so forth. We've been integrating a lot more of these into Atmos, our CLI at Cloud Posse. The newest one that they've just added is Freeze. And why Freeze is interesting is, well, one of the challenges you have when you do screenshots, especially in documentation, is that they get out of date pretty quickly. They become stale. And keeping them up to date becomes the responsibility of your team to do so. And at the same time, if you just have code and you don't test the code, you don't even know that your example works. So the best outcome is you actually have a working like test folder of code snippets that you can validate. And then when you need to have nice graphics that showcase what that code does, well, you can use Freeze to generate those and take a, cause a screenshot of that to happen. I guess it doesn't even need to technically even be, code. You can literally take the snapshot of running any single command. This is on the heels of another command by Charmbracelet, and I tabbed away there at the wrong time. Charmbracelet has another really awesome utility we've been using at Cloud Posse. We've announced it previously on Office Hours, but I'll bring it up again. It's called VHS. And if you have a CLI utility, this is the best way to demonstrate quickly what it does and keep it up to date without putting the burden on the developer to keep that up to date all the time, because they also distribute a GitHub action for VHS. So we use this at Cloud Posse for a lot of our CLI utilities to showcase how it works. So check out VHS and check out Freeze. Matt, were you going to say something? No. All right.
Oh, I love a lot of Charmbracelet's things.
Yeah, you turned us on to them, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, they're doing a great service to the community of TUIs in particular.
Yeah. Well, I'm laughing because I come across a lot of people. Oh, Cloud Posse, awesome! I love all your modules. We use them, do all these things, and then we talk. So they learn a little bit more about what Cloud Posse, what we do as a professional services company, or selling our reference architectures, or actually helping companies adopt our modules. But it almost comes as a surprise. And I am embarrassed to say that I could not say what Charmbracelet as a company does, but they do produce a lot of awesome Go utilities. Matt, do you know what they do as a company, or?
I did, and I forget because I looked it up a long time ago, wondering what it was, but I forget now.
Anyways, there is a company behind Charmbracelet. Check them out and see if they can help you in your business, because we need them to continue to exist and pump out cool utilities for open source. All right. And if you weren't sure what Cloud Posse does, check us out too, because we do some cool stuff. that you can buy. All right. All right. So we have the Cloud Posse EKS cluster module. We've been supporting this for many years. We're continuing to support and invest in it. A number of months ago, Amazon came out with support for managing the auth config through an API. It took us a little while to get around to it, but we did implement that. And one of the great things we've done is invest and continue investing in the migration guide to go from the V3 of our module to the V4 of our module. And we're updating it with the lessons learned, upgrading our customers using the module. It's a big change, but the good thing is that it's not a destructive change and you can do it in place. It's a little bit difficult to automate from a GitOps perspective, as major breaking changes often are, but there is a path and the documentation lays out that path. So if you're using our modules and want to upgrade to that, take advantage of it. I will point out some obvious gotchas doing this. They're more obvious in hindsight. So the way you used to manage the auth config map in a programmatic way using Terraform with Kubernetes and EKS is you would use the Kubernetes provider at the same time to manage that auth config map using Terraform resources. That, of course, required that you had connectivity to the cluster. So that was a drawback. It meant you had to be on a VPN or you had to run your automation with runners inside of a VPC with connectivity to the cluster. Both are best practices, so not a big deal. Okay. Now with the auth config API, you don't even need connectivity to the cluster anymore. So that's awesome. But what might suck is if you're still using the Kubernetes provider or the Helm provider somewhere else, because you're still going to need connectivity to the cluster. It's obvious, I mean, to say that, it's just that it's made even more obvious now when you don't even need to manage the cluster anymore with those providers. Others have mentioned, this is a argument for using add-ons, and that's true. So if you can get add-ons that do the same thing for you, use them, and you still don't need connectivity to the cluster to get those add-ons deployed. And there are a lot of add-ons out there. All right, I'll pause there. Any feedback or insights? All right. Next announcement. Just two more here. And they're quick ones. So Hermit Crab is it's an interesting alternative way to access your Terraform providers. It's a mirroring service. So if you want to have, if you want to control your HA, your availability for Terraform providers, this Hermit Crab is something you can deploy to do that. It will mirror the providers. Now, that's good. You can mirror the providers. But what annoys me is that you can't do the same thing for modules because there's an actual mirror protocol for providers. And I don't understand why there's not a mirror protocol for modules when there's like a 10-to-1 ratio of modules used to providers used. So the chances are that a module needs to be mirrored is even greater. And you're just as, up a creek without a paddle if you can't get your modules as if you can't get your providers. Anyways, my rant. End rant. And last announcement. For your home automation people, I was excited to see this little project, but it sounds like it's still pretty young and has some rough edges. There's been a few of these that have come up over the years. This is an easy way, like in your home lab, possibly even for your company. If you have a small little startup or something, you want to host some open source software like Bookstack or something, you can deploy this on a server. It just makes it very easy to plug and play, click and play to run containers on like on a host. Some people mention a good point. A lot of the problems with these things it's easy to start and it sucks to maintain because, well, when you go and upgrade, things break. This doesn't fix the upgrade problem, is my understanding. So how you solve that, that's where the money is to be made, and that's not easy. And that's it. Matt, we only have 10 minutes here. I want to give you a full chance to discuss what you learned doing your Open Tofu upgrade. So probably not worth racing through it here at the end of the call, but I thought I'd bring it up if you did want to. Or Matt Galley might have left already. Or...
No, I didn't leave. Yeah, we published a blog post about it. I think that's where we were talking about this.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to chat about it if anybody had questions. I'm like more than happy to talk about it another time when we have more time.
Let's
If people
bring it
do
up,
have questions about it.
Yeah. So for now, if you've just been curious about, if you're looking for other people's experiences and strategies for updating from Terraform to OpenTofu, and you want to see kind of a real world case study, if you will, in doing that, Matt, feel free to share your post here in the chat, but we'll talk about it more next week. So give it fair time and interest. Cool. We have about 10 minutes, a little bit less. Any announcements or questions? Michael, I see you just raised your hand.
Yeah, I had one question, and I guess this is the ask for the community. I'll give a brief kind of overview. So I mentor junior engineers and provide or produce training materials for LinkedIn Learning and Pluralsight. And I'm just reflecting on like some of the training that I do or mentoring that I do with people. And it's kind of like it's very pointed in the sense that if you're looking at a whole system of an application, they drop in one particular point of it. Maybe they drop in at the database, maybe they drop in at the front end, the back end, or whatever. But I'm trying to think of a way to get people, particularly from more of a DevOps or sort of like a TechOps perspective, to look at an entire system end to end from the network to the user. And so I'm just like, brainstorming and thinking about how I could build out a system that does that. But before I did that, I wanted to see if there were any like sample systems, and by sample I mean like something that somebody could stand up on their own in AWS, GCP, Azure, something like that, that implements an entire system front to back, from the network level all the way up to some sort of front end. It could be some like just simple store or other, demo, even a to-do list app or something like that. But it has all the layers that one might think of for an enterprise level app. So they could see the whole thing and then drop in at each point in this architecture to know, like, basically to see the impacts of changes that are made on the front end and how they affect the back end affect the front end, database, all that kind of stuff. Because again, like when I'm teaching somebody, this is the database, they may not be thinking about it from the whole perspective. So before I build that out, I was just wondering if anybody had anything to reference or maybe use instead.
Until you got towards the end there, where the scope escalated on what you needed, I thought I had the perfect answer for you, except for I don't know the brand off the top of my head. I'll look it up after the call. There's a service, they reached out to us. We were almost going to use them for like an LMS. And what stood out about them, what was really nice, was they could bring up ephemeral accounts basically on the fly, prepaid with limits, so that if you're running a course, people don't have to have an Amazon account. They don't have to, configure all of that and go through that rigmarole. They can just get started on the course right away. And after they're done with that lesson, it just wipes it out. I'll have to look it up what that service was called. Would that be interesting?
It might be Cloud Guru.
Oh, no, I don't think it was a Cloud Guru, but Cloud Guru does that?
Well, yeah, Pluralsight and a Cloud Guru, which is now a part of Pluralsight, they offer what they call Cloud Labs. And basically you start the lab and it spins up an ephemeral account, creates all the resources for you, and you can do the lab. I'm looking for something that's a little more along those lines, but it has everything. For example, if you're looking at a lab for WordPress, you're going to get your VM running WordPress. You might even get a database, but But the lab itself is for WordPress. It's not for everything in the end. You know what I
I
mean?
gotcha. Yeah. So you don't care about how the VPC is set up, how the VM is set up, all that stuff. You
Yeah,
need a
exactly.
working WordPress in the end. So is there a quick way to get all of that other stuff up and running so you can do your lesson on WordPress?
Yeah, there are. I'll post some in the links, Michael. I mean, on AWS CloudFormation, they actually have some references for something like a WordPress site, which is a CloudFormation stack that you could bootstrap basically on your new account and basically have WordPress up and running as a CloudFormation. And maybe from your teaching point of view, not focus that much on what CloudFormation is as the start, but like start at the WordPress side and say, okay, well, here's your front end, here's your back end, here's your database, here's your architecture, here's what a load balancer is, here's what it looks like. And then basically work back how you got it to the point of here's how it got articulated as code in CloudFormation.
Yeah, and I'll add one more caveat to it. I mean, again, I don't want to take up all the time, but the other caveat would be traffic. So again, it's another thing to say, like, here is an application, you just spun it up and it's running, but now you have users that are actually sending traffic through your application, and then you can really see the implications of making changes to your infrastructure while it's live. I mean, I'm just trying to get more realistic hands-on, like stuff that we may do every day for enterprise level apps, you know, but a user is coming in, they're going to stand up their website and they're going to make changes to it all day long. And when they go to, you know, refresh the browser, it works. But what if somebody refreshes that while you're actually live changing code or changing a database or, you know, that sort of stuff. So the traffic is the other caveat to add to the equation.
To be clear, I think there's also a difference between what you need for a demo to explain how these concepts work and what you need from, like, here's a production ready, operationalized WordPress setup, you know, and everything like that. And I don't think you need the latter. I think you need the former, and the former can be a little bit easier.
Oh, yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're at time. Alan, if you see any of those and share them. Well, Alan, do you have something else you just want to add quickly there?
So just very quickly, 1 minute. Just a very interesting security read that I posted in the Office Hours channel on a interesting vulnerability that was identified in AWS IAM roughly 6 months ago, been fixed since, but now has a published post. So yeah, not going to rant about it, but just a very interesting read on from the security side of it, which I thought was
yeah, let me see here. I'll pull it up in a second. So it's this one here.
Yeah.
Fix this vulnerability. Yeah, I was just trying to remember if we posted something on the original vulnerability back when it came, because it sounded vaguely familiar. But I don't remember right now. All right, well, why don't we bring this up for next week and we can talk about it some more, what happened there. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. We are going to be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/cloudposse. It's a great way to also share it with your team if you found anything about today's session interesting. To register for our live office hours, go to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. And if you do listen to podcasts and that's how you consume media, we post every office hours session to our podcast. Go to podcast.cloudposse.com. If you're interested in working with Cloud Posse and seeing how we can help you at your business leverage Terraform efficiently at scale, it's awesome for funded startups and enterprises. Go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, cloudposse.com/quiz, and we'll see if we can help you. Take care. Bye.